Hotep. Brother Beniti, I'm ready. And what we're going to do in this particular post, something we've been talking about for the last several weeks on the radio show, trying to connect these aspects, and that aspect is basically ancestral worship, its connection with the occult, left-hand path practices, how it all ties in. It is an important aspect. I think sometimes not looked at thoroughly, and the connection is not made. When dealing with more ancient systems of magic, mainly African spirituality, African witchcraft, African magic. We've talked about before in the past some of the origin of those systems when going into, say, systems of Palo Mayombe, on back to even more ancient systems of African spirituality. We've gotten into it into the essence of Egypt. We talked about how a lot of these left-hand path practices, such as vampirism, have its origin in ancient Egypt. We talked about in a previous class its connection with the fourth dynasty of the Pharaohs. We've broken down a lot of the different deities in ancient Egypt under the systems of Heka. Now, dealing with African spirituality, the Vodun pantheon, we've discussed that too. The Lohas of the Vodun pantheon, accessing those archetypes and energies. That's a highly spiritual, magical system. What I want to focus on, I bring those up because a lot of that connects to systems of ancestral worship, venerating the dead, venerating deceased energies, for lack of a better word, that are connected to your spiritual bloodline. This is an important practice, and it does have its origin and its roots in left-hand path practices. Though not really talked about in depth in many circles, but the path of necromancy, for an example, which is veneration of the dead or contacting spirits of the deceased or the dead, is important, but it really starts with your own personal bloodline. Acknowledging that and venerating that is key, because it makes a link and a connection. It creates or fills the gap that's left between you and, for lack of a better word, making connection with your superconscious. When one acknowledges their ancestors or spirits of the dead by venerating them, now you'll see in many different practices, especially African traditions and African practices, the customs of leaving offerings, summoning them by name, venerating them on various different levels, setting up shrines and altars that attract and bring in the energy of these ancestors. Again, when I say ancestors, obviously it starts with bloodline, family, ancestors first. But it also means contacting a hierarchy, for a lack of a better word, or a group of various different beings, depending on what spiritual system you're working with. Whether it's Congo, you can work with and access various different Congo spiritual energies when working these systems of African ancestral worship, which is a very powerful system. A lot of these rituals in working this practice is done by communication of the drum. And the drum, man, that could be a whole class in itself. But the drum is key in activating the energy of these spiritual ancestors in a ritualistic setting. The patterns, the rhythms, the vibrations, and the frequency of the drums creates a certain vibrational frequency where one is overcome by the energy of these spiritual ancestors, which can put an individual in a spiritual like trance, for a lack of a better word, which some people will confuse for possession, and I don't like to use that word again because it's very religious and it has a lot of negative connotations. Because when people hear possession, their mind just reverberates to a bunch of negative things. These spiritual systems and practices go way back and predate most of the modern shit that you read about today. So the question is, what origin does African spirituality or ancestral worship have in left-hand path philosophy and doctrine? And the answer is a lot. Because when you look at a lot of the rituals and the traditional systems, regardless of what path you practice, or path you choose to practice on the left-hand path, because again, as we said before, there's a multitude of them. It's limitless. There's so many different avenues. But when you look at the traditions and some of the practices of these rituals, you'll see their origins go back to a lot of the African systems of spirituality. I want to take an excerpt from a book in dealing with venerating the dead and working with ancestral worship, and it comes from the book called The Black Ship, and it's section 5 on page 25. It talks about concerning the ancestors. Let me just go through this real quick. It says, concerning with the souls of the dead, particularly the souls of dead family members. It's a primal matter in the general context of human spirituality and religion. Veneration of the dead, most especially of the ancestors, may be the origin of religious belief and practice in general. In any case, it certainly would remain more personal than the worship of deities, and has been an important part of many cultures and religions. I want to stop there. The key here is it's very personal, as opposed to when it says here venerating, or which some people falsely do, worshiping deities. In this case, on the left-hand path, we don't worship deities. We activate the archetype of what that deity represents. But working with your own personal bloodline ancestors or venerating the dead is very personal. And that's the key. That's what makes it even more powerful, because everybody's experience with it is unique in the sense that they're tapping in to the very energies that they're comprised of. And this is why it has a profound effect, ancestral worship, especially in a ritualistic setting. And again, I can only speak for myself and what I've seen of others and how it affects them. By blood, I know those Congo and African ancestral spirits are very strong, especially when the drums, as I said before, when those drums are played and that vibrational energy is built up. It harnesses naturally what's there by DNA, and that's what makes it personal. And when you go back to a lot of these ancestral systems or African spirituality, that's what makes it more unique than a lot of modern day stuff. And when I say a lot of modern day stuff, where religion has become incorporated in it. The deities, as it mentioned here, religious people worship deities now instead of activating the archetype of that deity. That's the difference. In ancient systems, it's not what they did. They didn't worship anything. They basically were tapping in to the higher aspect of themselves. And what I mean by that is, to put it in simplistic terms, they became the deity instead of worshiped the deity. So they raised their vibrational frequency up to personify as the energy of what that archetype or deity represented. Let me give you an example of that. For an example, if you went to a ritual, or we just did a ritual in the Dravidian pantheon of Kali, and I want to clarify this, and we talked a little bit about this on the last radio show we did. When one takes the implements that represents Kali, the images, what Kali let's per se would project, and enhances that with all the other things that are associated, put it in a ritualistic setting. In the case of what we did, mantras, which built up the energy, dancing and drumming. All this does is enhance and activate what we would call, in this case, Kali energy. It's the same thing if we're working with ancestors of the Congo and working with African spirits in a ritualistic setting when certain implements are put there that are affiliated with those spirits, be it certain herbs, certain incense, certain ritualistic implements. If we're working with say the Vudon Pantheon, Baron Samedi, whether it's Palo and it's Mama Cholo, any of those implements that are affiliated with those deities or archetypes, the individual that has disciplined and trained themselves to work with them can harness the energy of what that represents, and that's how they raise themselves up to become the deity, or tap into the energy and consciousness of what the deity represents. This is you'll see the theme in a lot of these spiritual systems. Now, people misinterpret that as, them, again, I hate to use the word possessed. Some say mounted in some traditions. Or people will confuse that and say, I've communicated with this deity, and they start to separate it as an incident that took place outside themselves. Now, we say something a lot, or you'll hear me say something a lot. All is mental, mental is all. Now, when we say that nothing exists outside of the subconscious mind, what we're saying is, we're not saying you can't have experiences that present themselves as something that is happening externally outside of yourself. What we're saying, in essence, it's not, because you're able to activate all of this by way of the subconscious mind. That's what we're saying. So some people will say, well, if it's really nothing exists out of the subconscious mind, what about when I'm having an experience, say where I see my deceased mother or my grandmother? What I'm trying to say is, yes, you are seeing that. It is presenting itself like that. That's the illusion, or the visual that your subconscious mind has created, and that is exactly what you're seeing, creating the illusion that it's taking place outside of yourself. But in essence, it's all exists, or the power of it is activated by way of the subconscious mind. This is important to understand, so we don't get caught up in, let's say, modern day Ifa practices, where it's looked at where if someone is mounted by one of the Orishi, let's say, or Obatala or Shango, etc., one kind of is given the impression or the understanding that there's this external deity that came from outward and latched itself on to an individual, and that individual tapped into one small fragment or essence of that particular Orishi. Again, back to the external aspect of worship. So now we've accepted, whether you have consciously or subconsciously, that there is something external, some higher force, some higher or greater power outside of yourself, that you're searching for, trying to venerate, or trying to tap into. When in essence, what we're saying is, in the 7 Hermetic principles of Tahuti, all is mental, mental is all, where it really is all existing inside of yourself, inside of your subconscious mind. So that's what I mean when I said earlier that the more modern day practices have become more religious, whereas when you go into the origin of a lot of these African spiritual systems, none of it had anything to do with religion. It had all to do with various different ritualistic systems where you were able to tap in to the high aspect of your superconscious, and that's been lost, unfortunately. All these systems have become watered down. Even I mentioned Palo earlier. Palo aspect of Santeria called Palo Manto, that's become very watered down, where a lot of religious influence. So when we go back to a lot of the ancient African systems of ancestral worship, this is what it's talking about. It becomes more of a personal thing. It's not impersonal in the sense that it becomes very routine. such as a structured religious ceremony. But let me go on and read a little more about this. The peoples and cultures that have made offerings to their ancestors in honor of the dead have been primitive and refined, ancient and modern. Again, explaining that this goes back, many, many years ago up until the present. But again, it has become modernized, unfortunately, and sometimes that's not good. From all parts of the world, it is actually cultures that do not engage in this practice that stand out as unusual, which I find that interesting. We'll talk about that in a second. Offerings are made to the dead both to honor and to placate them, as attitudes towards the dead can range from reverence to fear. The rituals dedicated to the ancestors also have the purpose of reinforcing and repairing the concept of family. So I want to point out two things. The offerings, when you see it, it's very customary in these traditions to leave offerings for the ancestors. It could be in the form of foods. It could be in the form of objects or things that were connected to your ancestors. Or if it's a specific tradition, it could be certain implements. If it's a certain spirit or a spiritual ancestor that's affiliated with a certain weapon, say it's a warrior ancestor. One, not only just talking about food offerings, one can also offer implements that connect and access the energy of these spiritual ancestors. So the key here is this is done to honor and to placate them, to activate, to invoke, to tap into the energy, because you want to invoke the power of your ancestors. And honor is the key word, not worship. I want to stress that, because when we're worshiping something external, we have now lessened and surrendered our divinity to who and what we really are when we give ourselves up to something external. So if you give yourself up to any one of the three monotheistic religions, as I've said before many times in the past, be it Islam, Christianity, Judaism, you have basically done a travesty to yourself, because you have now basically given your very soul essence over to something that is not a reality, that it does not exist, to some spook god that resides somewhere up in the sky that you can't confirm exists. So it's pretty much the opposite of who and what you really are. So that's key. So it's more personal. So honoring is a key word. And something that I found interesting in this last part of the quote, it is reinforcing and repairing the concept of family. That is a key aspect in these spiritual systems, because that's what really creates the strong family unit, or the real pure unity and strength of real family by blood. When venerating the dead and honoring the ancestors. There's another aspect, and we'll get a little bit into that. One can also honor and invoke the presence of the ancestors in working high systems of black magic. And some might call it voodoo. Some might call it sciences of the African witch doctor. These are all other various systems of spiritual black magic that can't go to the wayside. And even when we talked about, and I did a post a little while back called, is the origin of the left-hand path in ancient Egypt? And the answer is not just Egypt, Africa in general. All these spiritual practices have their origin in be it Egypt or West Africa or Africa or what we call Africa today in general, and that can't be denied. That can't be disputed. Even when you look at the more modern European systems of left-hand path worship, or even if you're going to lighter, fluffy sides of witchcraft and magic, be it Wicca or practices of the Druid culture, you see the African influence. So if you look close, you see watered down, obviously, a more watered down version of it. But if you look hard, you really see the connection, and you really see I mean that takes somebody that actually really practices magic to make a lot of those connections, because if somebody's not familiar with it, and you look at, say, some of the Wiccan practices, which are basically the European version of some of these systems of magic, but very watered down. It's easy to see if you are an actual spiritual practitioner of this path. Very easy to see and make the connection. So it's important to understand it, and this is why I'm saying, to bring this point home, I found, and again, this is not to tell anybody by any means what to and what not to do. I found when you're on this left-hand path, if you incorporate some aspect, whichever way you feel, whichever system you come up with, whatever system you create, I've found when you do incorporate some form of ancestral worship in your spiritual practice, on some level, it really creates good results. I think it really harnesses your spiritual abilities, and if you want to say, your consistency in working your craft in black magic. It's powerful when one really understands it and knows how to work with it. So that's important. That's key. All right. Then it goes on to say the value of the ancestors to those on the left-hand path. What's the connection to this? On the left-hand path, let's talk about that. It may not immediately be evident. Our path is individualistic and personal. It is often a social, if not antisocial. The energies within us are alien, and we often disregard or disdain such group ties as family. More, as the left-hand path has always been rare and hidden, those who are called to it may often be brought into serious conflicts with their families, who may be related in blood but are seemingly or actually opposers in spirit. Plainly speaking, why would we make offerings to those who are dead and gone when our goal is our own becoming? That's a good question. And why would we make offerings to the spirits of the parents or grandparents that may have never truly known us, respected us, or in some cases may have willfully harmed us? Well, here's the answer to that. The simple fact is that even for those of us that have made some progress on the path of self-willed, becoming, much of our circumstance and character, for good or ill, has been shaped by those who have come before us. For those whose family relationships are good, the positive gifts of inheritance can be acknowledged, honored, and celebrated. Okay? For those whose relationships have not been good, there's an understanding and healing to be gained, and death may even have changed the perspective of those shades with whom you have quarreled. For most of our family relationships are a mix of the good and the troubled, and the work will also be mixed. Through this work, we may create a new spirit of family within the houses that we establish. That's why I said earlier that this system also heals and repairs the concept of family. Well, there's your answer. There's your purpose for doing it. There's the reason why we say honoring the ancestors and venerating the ancestors in these spiritual systems, to repair that concept of family, to create healing. So when one says, what's the purpose of me doing this, especially if it's to ancestors that I never knew or met, or maybe I'm doing it to ancestors per se that didn't have a good relationship with. Well, that's where the repairing and the healing comes in. And again, I'm going to flip back to something. If you've ever attended a Goon ceremony or a spiritual, some form of spiritual ancestor ceremony, you'll see a lot of healing takes place at these ceremonies on a multitude of levels, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically. And what I mean by that is, one, mentally and emotionally, you'll find, and a lot of people will tell you this in their experiences, partaking in these rituals and attending these ceremonies, these rituals are designed to bring a lot of stuff to the surface that you might not be acknowledging or facing, and a lot of that may not be good stuff. It can become very emotional, and a very emotional experience. So the ancestors bring all of those energies out, the spiritual, the mental, the emotional, and there's a lot of healing going on a multitude of levels, consciously and subconsciously, during these rituals. And it leaves the impression or the effect of a multitude of emotions on an individual. So one can become very, very emotional, where they might be crying. It could be tears of joy, tears of sadness. Extreme laughter or joy can kick in. Because again, it brings to the surface what the individual is dealing with or what that individual needs to tap into or contact. This is the purpose. That's what this concept of healing and repairing that family concept. So this is why we honor, this is why we venerate when dealing with ancestral worship. It's not just done in vain. It should never be done in a religious mindset. And unfortunately, a lot of systems have become very religious mind orientated, and that's not how you approach this. There's a high magical method to really work in this and it becoming very beneficial for you, okay? All right, so then it goes on to say, however, filial sentiment aside, there are also practical reasons for working magically with the spirits of your ancestors. The first reason is that because of their lingering concern for the welfare of their family and descendants, the spirits of some ancestors will act as practical allies. That's why I said earlier, one can activate the power of the deceased to work for them on a multitude of levels, opening pathways, doors, and roads, be it to finances, be it for healing, etc. And this is why I said, in addition, connecting that ancestral worship with systems of magic is key. They're connected. And this is why, or one of the important reasons why the ancestors are venerated and worshipped. Worshipped in the sense that they're honored, not grovel to in front of and pray to in a religious sense. I want to make sure we're clear with that. And let me skip down here. They can grant insight, help clear obstacles, kind of just what I was just saying, from your path, and steer good things your way. This is what happens when you venerate them. You can ask them to do this always as a group. You can also take specific issues to specific ancestors based on the professions or skills that they had in life. That would be understanding archetypes of your personal ancestors and spiritual ancestors. Being able to identify archetypes and what they represent would determine what issue, say you were bringing a specific issue, as it said here, you would obviously be wise in selecting the correct ancestor to go to. This is not essentially different from seeking the support and assistance of your living family. No different. In addition to feeding the ancestors, you can also perform rites to comfort them or to aid in their spiritual progress. The ancestors lived as all people lived. They both experienced and caused their share of wrongs and regrets in life. You can use your magic to help in healing these conditions. In doing so, you can help the spirits of your ancestors perhaps alleviate some of the lingering present-day effects of these conditions and generally untangle any knots in your family's weird or karma. In extreme cases, such entanglements might manifest as a form of generational curse. So you can see that such work can benefit you as much as it does your ancestors. Now, I want to clarify that. When we say curse, okay, I don't want people to get spooked out. But there's a saying in traditions that the son carries the burden of the father, the daughter carries the burden of the mother. That's what we mean when we say a generational curse. It could be a history, for an example. Some families might have a history of women where they constantly get in abusive relationships. That's what it means when it says a curse, a history of something not positive that needs to be broken. It could be a generational thing where 3 or 4 generations of men in the family, from father to son to grandfather to great-grandfather, on back to great-great-grandfather, have a history of not being good with money. So by venerating the ancestors, by working with particular ones, you can create solutions and clearing the obstacles on those paths. This is very important in understanding with ancestral worship and how it can be utilized. So I want to be clear, not curse in the sense of something spooky or scary, but something along those lines. Just to give you a couple quick examples. Then it goes on to say, this is key right here in this last section, and we got two more sections, but this section right here is key. Once you've established a relationship with your ancestors, you can also make them aware of the greater aims of the grimoire. You might read to them about the Pandemonium Mandala, for an example, or any other spiritual system. Then all those of them that will, those who resonate with the work, to help you in your efforts to manifest. Okay? Finally, though, it may seem simple in working magically with the spirits of your ancestors. You begin to work magically with the basic forces of life, death, time, and becoming. That's key right there, too. Practical work with the ancestors begins with setting up a shrine or an altar for them. Now, this is basic. And I always suggest people start here. You should always have an ancestral altar. And this should be, again, something that should stand on its own. And it should exclusively deal with bloodline ancestors, spiritual ancestors. Keeping on that particular altar, you should have images of deceased members of your bloodline. If you don't have pictures of all, writing their name down on parchment paper and keeping them on the altar is key. And have some type of ritual where you venerate them on a weekly basis. Could be daily, could be every other day, but do it consistently. The shrine is important, or setting up an altar for these ancestors, because remember, altars harness the energy of whatever spiritual work you do. Okay. Then it goes on to say in the last section of this, says this can be a small. The altar can be a small or simple space in your home. It can be adorned with photographs of deceased ancestors, objects that belong to them, items that symbolize your ancestral cultural heritage. Any photographs used should not contain images of people that are still living. You should never put images of anybody that is living or alive on the altar. And there is no correct or wrong, right or wrong way to do this. Like it says, you can put different objects that belong to your ancestors, photographs, anything that might make that symbolism or that symbolic connection between you and your ancestors. So that's something you kind of got to feel out when creating your own shrine or altar, something you want to kind of feel out as you're creating it. Because again, back to what it said originally, is very personal. That's what makes this spiritual system pretty much different than anything else. Very personal. All right. Then it goes on to say, obviously in your culture, I'll skip through some of this, you should obviously have the knowledge and the research of what you're working with and what type of energy that you're working with. Two key offerings on your altar, obviously, candles and water. Water should always be on there because water represents life. I always recommend having the 4 elements on there. Water, the candle represents fire element, but water and fire is constantly ignited on your altar. You should have some form of soil or earth representing the earth element, and the burning of incense represents your air element. So you have the 4 elements: earth, wind, air, fire, that activate the spiritual energy on the altar, which is key. That's basic foundation. All right. Then it goes on to say, I'm gonna skip here. And again, you can set it up any way you want. Again, no particular way. I don't want you to look at it in any, because people will always say, how long? How elaborate should I make it? Well, that's personal. Again, that's up to you. There is no, again, right or wrong way. Go with your intuition on that. Go with your creative intuitiveness, if that's what you want, if that's the word we want to use. Some like to go very elaborate. Some like to go very basic and keep it simple. It's kind of whatever vibrational mood you're feeling. That's the correct way. Because I'll get a lot of personal emails about how should I or should I not set up your altar. And we don't want to get in that mindset, because then that takes us back to a religious way of thinking subconsciously. Now, as far as offerings, people say, well, how long should I leave offerings there? I wouldn't leave anything there more than 7 days. This is just me. Some people like to leave offerings a lot, consistently. I don't do it that much. I'll do it occasionally. know this: when you do it a lot and consistency, you'll find that the spirits and the ancestors will activate in you the need to do it a lot more. So I would do it periodically as part of that honoring and venerating, but I wouldn't leave anything there longer than 7 days. I would take it away and remove it. But in short, that's just some of the basics. We can, and we'll get a little bit more intricate with it down the road, but that's just, some of the foundations and basics of ancestral worship and how it connects to the left-hand path, and how it connects to working with these spiritual systems of what we call black magic. Because voodoo, what we know as voodoo today, or voodoo, I mentioned the African witch doctor earlier. You'll see the African witch doctor in many cultures was looked at as the wise mystic when something needed to be resolved. That's who they went to. They always went to the witch doctor, and whether it was curing, healing, or the resolution to a problem. And they worked with a multitude of spiritual, magical systems, activating and venerating and working with the spirits of the dead. Because, again, I want to clarify this. When you hear that term, again, it's another term I really don't like using. Spirits of the dead basically really are the true living. You understand? They are the ones that are actually living. Because as you're alive physically, you as you get older, you actually are dying on a regular basis because you come closer to death, physical death. When one is talking about spiritually dead, or the spirit dead, we're talking about, individuals that have evolved to a higher state of being or existence. So that's what we mean when we say that. But you're going to find out that in all of these spiritual systems, and again, too much to get into, we could be here all night just talking about that, always incorporated a lot of rituals and higher systems of black magic. Again, as I said, when contacting or venerating the dead, to have the spirits of the deceased do bidding for you. As I said in there earlier, clearing obstacles out of your path, etc. Yes, there's an aspect to this where one can activate and summons the spirits of the dead to cause harm to an individual. It's very real. As fictitious as that may sound to some people, but it's a very delicate, system. One always has to be in the right and be in serious harm or danger when doing that. If one is really being threatened and danger and is not doing it out of personal greed or emotions, or out of spite, envy, and one is not doing it for that purpose, because it'll come right back on your ass. So you got to work with the laws of the universe. Balancement. You always have to be in the right if you're going to get to that point and work that system. It should never be worked just for personal gain, greed, revenge, and you're not in the right, because believe me, it comes full circle. You will have to, pay up for it, for lack of a better word. It's not something you want to play with. I can tell you that. So there is that aspect to it, but this is the purpose for venerating the ancestors. And again, I recommend, and I'm going to leave you with this last thing. I recommend, to all people on some level, and that level can be whatever you decide, create your own system. I always would encourage people to have that in the foundation of your left-hand path practices and your black magic spiritual workings. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, most definitely. So I'm going to stop there. So hopefully, I hope this video helped connect this for you on a whole different level as far as veneration of the ancestors. And again, a couple quick notes. Should have, pretty much the dates are confirmed for our next event, which is going to be February 24th and February 25th. On the 24th, we will be doing a ritual working with the Patroloha and the Gitis of the Budon Pantheon, specifically Baron Samedi in this particular next ritual. So if you'd like to come out and participate in that, I'm going to give you the email address in a minute for information. And the following Saturday, we will be doing a class on African spirituality, ancestral worship, etc. That'll be on the 25th. Both events are free, and I'll give you the email address for that. Again, as far as spiritual consultations, which as I've now recently started doing the last couple of months, addressing the basic questions about it, so I don't have to get the mundane emails, meaning what is a spiritual consultation, how does it work, what's the cost, etc. So I address that now in the video, so now if you decide you want to do it, you can just contact me and we can set up an appointment. Spiritual consultations are basically an open, free-for-all on anything. You pretty much dictate the flow of the consultation, what you want to talk about. If you have a specific area to work that you want to focus on, or you just want to deal with things in general, as that consultation is going on, whatever spiritual energies come through, I will communicate that to you. And usually what happens is specific archetypes that are connected to you, specific ancestors, all that stuff will come through in some shape, form, or fashion. And basically whatever comes through, that's what you'll be given in that avenue, in addition to what specific questions that you might have. It lasts up to 1 hour. The charge to do it is $50. It can be done via Skype. It can be done via Google Hangouts. It can be done over the phone if you are not local. If you are local, obviously it can be done in person. I asked to at least give me a 48-hour notice in order to do it. It lasts up to 1 hour. So until we're done in 1 hour, whichever comes first. And it can be paid via PayPal. So that's how a spiritual consultation works. Again, it's straight chasing, no bullshit. It's basically information. I want to make this clear. It's not nothing like going to a babalawo or some spiritual guru mystic who's going to basically con you and tell you need to do a bunch of this shit, you need to do this and that, and they're going to charge you for all that shit. You're basically going to get information if spirits and ancestral, or when they do come through, you'll be given the information and the tools, and then you'll do it for yourself. You'll know how to do it for yourself. That's how I work with and deal with spiritual consultations. I ain't going to be doing shit for you. It's basically, we're going to tap in on a multitude of levels on the abilities of your superconscious, and you'll take that information and tools, and trust me, I guarantee you, if you utilize that information and tools that comes through in the consultation, I guarantee it'll open up many doors for you if you put in the work, time, energy, and effort. So again, that's how a spiritual consultation works. It lasts up until 1 hour. The charge to do it is $50. It can be paid via PayPal the day before the consultation. It can be done again if you're long distance via Skype. It can be done Google Hangouts, the emo app, or some form of social media. It can be done old school, straight up over the phone, which I don't prefer that method because I like to see the person and tap into and read and see what kind of energy that they're working with. If you are here and you're able to get to me personally, then we do it face to face, which is even better. And again, 48-hour notice. So that's how spiritual consultation works. So if you're watching the video and you've heard me talk about it in the past, there's no need you don't have to email me. What is this consultation and how does it work? That's what it is. That's how it works. If interested, you can send me an email. And it's real simple. You can say you are interested in doing a consultation and just send me the days and times that are best convenient for you to do it. And then I can compare it to my schedule. We just select the day and time, and bam, it's done with. We go ahead and we set it up and we do it. So hopefully that helps that. Now, as far as information on all the things I just mentioned, the event coming up on the 24th and the 25th, or on a spiritual consultation, you can email me at K as in Karen, H as in Harry, N as in Nicholas, U as in Unicorn, M as in Michael, the number 19 at gmail.com. That's Kanun19 ancestral@gmail.com. You can email me there for any information on the stuff that I just mentioned or talked about. And again, don't forget to tune in to our radio show Thursday nights on talkshoe.com, Awakening Universal Minds, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's pretty much what I got for you this week. So I hope this video on ancestral worship in the left-hand path, hopefully it gave you some insight on how to connect this. Okay? Peace.